My Lords, the Diego Garcia military base is essential to the security of the UK and our allies and to keeping British people safe. As we've repeatedly made clear, the agreement we have is vital for protecting our national security, guaranteeing the long-term future of a vital base for both the UK and the US, which had been under threat. And that is why the US and President Trump welcomed this deal in the spring, and all our Five Eyes allies support it. They understand the security capabilities that the base provides.
Well, my Lords, I find that a rather strange response. David Lammy said that we would listen to the United States when we made a decision. And Donald Trump has now come out and said that this is an act of gross stupidity. I think I'm right in saying that. This is being pursued because of matrix lawyers who are pursuing international law above the needs of this country. And so will the Minister take this back to the Department and argue against going along with the decision to give Diego Garcia to Mauritius?
No. The Noble Lord is completely wrong in his assertion about the motivation for doing this deal. This is about keeping this country and the citizens of this country safe. That will always be the first priority of this government. I think it's unedifying to see His Majesty's opposition take any opportunity to jump on a bandwagon led by Nigel Farage, who claimed this week that the President had a point about Greenland threatening their sovereignty. We fundamentally disagree with that position.
President Trump supported this measure and then changed his mind. And can I suggest that you don't take too much notice of a man that doesn't know the difference between Iceland and Greenland?
I mean, in all seriousness, we're speaking, as Noble Lords would expect, intensively with our friends and allies in the United States, because it's our understanding, and it's the United States' understanding, as far as we are aware, that this is still a deal which secures our security and that of the United States, and that this is a joint project. We will continue to have those conversations, as you would want us to do, and we will resist the temptation to get into sort of megaphone diplomacy over this, because there were those here who were urging us on Monday to get into preemptive tariffs and inflammatory comments and all of that. We didn't do that, and I think that the agreements that are starting to emerge show that that approach has been the right one.
My Lords, at the last count, there have been 12 U-turns from this government recently. Let me suggest to the noble lady that 13 could be her lucky number on this occasion. The former Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, as my noble friend said, really is a gift that keeps on giving. Last year, whilst negotiating this agreement, he said, and I quote, "If President Trump doesn't like the deal will not go ahead. They've got to be happy with the deal, or there is no deal." Is that still the policy of the government?
Well, as I've explained on I don't know how many occasions, this is a joint initiative. It is about securing a base for the United Kingdom and the United States, which we believe to be in the interests of us here in the UK, also our allies in the US, and actually for global stability. That's why we've gone about this, and presumably that is why the previous government set about negotiating a deal with Mauritius too.
If the reporting is correct, that the leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition asked the House Speaker Johnson to ask President Trump to change his position on the treaty, does the Minister Does the Minister agree that it is the British Parliament that should hold the British government to account and not a foreign state? And furthermore, does the Minister agree that we must, in this House, focus on Chagosian rights that have been denied of them for a generation and value for money for the British taxpayer, and not to pander to President Trump and ask him to intervene in British politics?
Well, can I just... I know the Noble Lord doesn't always want me to be nice to him on the floor of the House, but I do have to say that the Liberal Democrats, much as they have had their issues with this agreement, they have always been focused on the rights of the Chagosian communities, and they have put that case clearly, consistently, and I respect the way that they've gone about this. What we have not seen is any attempt to undermine the position as regarding the sovereignty of Greenland or to leverage other issues which fundamentally undermine NATO and the security of the Arctic region. And sadly, that is what we are seeing from others. So I do agree with the Noble Lord about the sovereignty of this Parliament and also commend him for the consistency with which he's approached this issue.
Crossbench. Are likely to spend a considerable amount of money in developing resources and so on in Greenland. If they were to do that, what assessment is the government making of the effect on the amount of money that might be available for Diego Garcia?
We're talking through our allies in NATO with the United States because we agree with them about how vital Arctic security is, and that does involve Greenland. But the right way to do this is collaboratively through NATO, and I think that's the position that we're getting to. And the same applies in many ways around the way that we're going to be approaching the base on Diego Garcia, because this is very much a shared endeavour.
The government claims that although neither the International Court of Justice nor the Tribunal of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea can reach a judgment binding on us on the sovereignty of Chagos, other countries may respond to opinions of those courts by withholding supplies, goods and facilities which the government claims would render the base inoperable. Can she now tell us, which she's refused to during the passage of this bill, which countries could withhold which supplies, goods and facilities which would render the base inoperable? And has she told President Trump that those same countries could still do that even once we've transferred sovereignty to Mauritius?
Any country could withhold any service relating to the operability of the base at any time, because the legal jeopardy in which it stood was sustained, and they would have it would be their right to do that. The reason we're trying to get the base onto a more secure legal footing is to avoid that proposition. This is something we are talking to the US about, and it's one of the reasons that they were supportive of the deal that we have done. So those conversations continue, and I can only assume that this is the same legal jeopardy that confronted the previous government that led them into multiple rounds of negotiation on the same issue.
I worked out that this minister and other ministers have told Parliament on over 50 occasions that the treaty can only go ahead with American support. So it's not just the President of the United States who condemned the deal. Marco Rubio did the same, as did Scott Bessent, who said that if the deal goes ahead, our FTA could be put at risk, thus jeopardising thousands of jobs in this country. So surely the minister should be statesmanlike and now insist that we put everything on hold pending grown-up talks with the American administration.
I don't know what I've done that isn't statesmanlike, but our intention is to have those conversations with the United States and come to an agreed position. And I think that has been consistently our view. I would encourage the Noble Lord to perhaps consider the words of the Prime Minister yesterday, who made our position, he was talking about Greenland, but made it clear that that the reason that President Trump was making the comments that he did about Diego Garcia was to try and leverage them to encourage us to take a different position on Greenland. That hasn't worked, and our position is consistent.
My Lords, Today programme this morning, the Foreign Secretary was asked by Amal Rajan whether or not it was true that this was going to cost £34 billion spread over a number of years. She failed to answer. She said it wasn't true, but then failed to give us the right figure. Is it 34 billion or is it another figure?
It's 3.4 billion. The reason that there's been a dispute over this is because some people don't understand inflation, but these numbers have been they've been calculated in the normal way that they are for all of these kinds of projects.
My Lords, the Noble Lord Lord Kagan has implied somehow that
the previous Foreign Secretary's remarks about not having the American consent would somehow now apply. Surely it is the case that the government took the views of the Americans and then reached an agreement, and that agreement is the one that stands. So could my noble friend tell the House, firstly, whether we are still committed to the principle of security, still committed to the importance of this base, and still committed to the idea that, and to the view, the clearly held view, that this is the best option for the British people and for world security as a whole.
That is correct. And the relationship that we have with the United States on security, on defence, on intelligence sharing is the deepest such relationship that has ever existed on this planet. And it's precious to us. We believe it to be precious to the United States. And we will continue to talk with them and to try to get to a common understanding that can be understood by everybody.